Hey guys, welcome to the first viewer build critique. Before we get things started, just a big thank you to everyone that submitted a build. Really means a lot to me. So our first builder is Herson, and they've said that their build is a recreation of Mexico City Metropolitan Cathedral at roughly a 1:1 scale, and it's part of a larger project to recreate most of Mexico City as it existed in the early 19th century. Just right off the bat, this is an incredible build. I mean, the level of detail here is just absolutely insane. Beautiful composition here with the sunset. Love that. And then here are the interiors. Just incredibly detailed. This is astonishing. I've pulled up some images of what the actual cathedral looks like, and I think you've done a really good job at kind of mimicking this very, very intricate ornamentation here. I mean, like, just the shape alone, you're kind of capturing that. Let me turn on the laser pointer. You're kind of capturing this kind of rich kind of, it's almost like bubbly ornamentation with the statues and the images. You see it here. Lots of custom heads, it looks like. And then you're just going to town with like the bamboo armor stands, really everything. This is like a really nice mastery of the different shaping tools that the game has to offer. You can see up here we've got some drip leaf in the ceiling. This is probably your best angle here. I like the contrast. This is very fully lit, and then the pews down here are less so. This kind of niche is really incredible. I don't even know what this is here in the center, but the armor stands and the statues work really nice. These kind of mixture of the yellow glazed terracotta and the blocks of raw gold works really well. There's a lot of these coral fans, which, you know, in some spaces they work really nicely. I think right here they do their job really well. Get kind of to the outside here. I feel like as a whole, these look great, but this is kind of style of building, because when you recreate something, where's the image here? When you're trying to recreate an existing build, you're trying to use the existing blocks that Minecraft has to make like an approximation of it, and so you've kind of gone all out on the shaping and the kind of general texture of it, especially with like these gradients here. And I feel like it kind of loses a bit of definition when you get close to it. Obviously from afar, it's like making like a painting where the broad kind of brushstrokes give off the silhouette and the atmosphere of this building, but then as you get closer into the detail, it kind of like makes the edges a little fuzzy. And so looking at like this main central part, I feel like using like the grindstones and a lot of these elements where like part of their texture has like a really dark part, you kind of see those a lot, and then it's kind of drawing away from the actual forms of this structure. You see here, looking at like this, you can see like a pretty clear, red brick wall, and then these kind of statues lined up like this, and we've got like a clear a clear pediment here. We get to yours, we're kind of losing the forest for the trees a little bit with the sheer amount of detail, and obviously this is all just personal touches, so feel free to take whatever you'd like from this. But I feel like with the exteriors especially, this kind of like crazy amount of detail ends up making it feel like a bit fuzzy. And so I would like to see some more definition on the actual structure itself. I feel like that can help make it read more as architecture compared to like kind of just a recreation of it. But again, phenomenal work. I absolutely love this, and I would love to see where this goes. With these critiques, I just want to make it clear, I'm not going to dog on anyone's builds. You guys are all incredible. and I'm more than happy that you wanted to submit something to this. Just, in the architecture sphere, whenever you do get a critique, your professor, your critiquer, they're always going to find something that you can always improve on. If you don't have anything to improve on, that is almost like a flaw. Like, if you've made a really good work of architecture, like, having something to improve on is really important. The design process never really stops. And so in these critiques, like, they'll give you a compliment sandwich. They'll say what you've done really well, and then they'll kind of deconstruct that and talk about, like, okay, I see this. Can you improve on this a little bit more? And so it may feel like they're really, like, harping on you, but they just kind of want to, like, see you further design process, maybe express your intentions a little bit more, etc. And then they'll finish it up and, tell you did a great job. This looks really good. And so, like, with any of these, I'm not trying to be mean. I would just love to give you all some kind of constructive feedback like I've received in class. So our next build is from Astral, and they're working on an opulent royal palace in a late Baroque or Rococo style. It's a work in progress, but this is what they've done so far. And this build uses a mod to place images into the world, which I'll show you in a sec in the interior. So right off the bat, this is like, it's really reading as like very monumental. Just like looking at the scale here, looks like one of these floors is about 10 blocks tall, maybe 9. And so this is something that absolutely like dwarfs the player. They're really only going to be as tall as like the base of this statue here. And so you're doing a really good job at reading like this kind of monumental, larger than life palace. I think it's really nice. You get here with the shaders off. I do have one kind of question about what this sort of element is supposed to be up here at the top. I like the way you've got the repeating bay system, and then you kind of switch it up here without a window. That's really nice. And so I like that you're trying to cap it off with something to kind of turn these repeating modules into something with a little bit more hierarchy. I'm just not sure what exactly is going on up here. If there's any like rooftop space that's going to be here, or if this is just mainly structural. I feel like it's a little bit too lightweight with nothing underneath the slabs here. Then color choice is pretty good. We're going with mainly a cool white here. I think the bamboo, this is something you could test. I think birch or oak might read a little bit less. It might fit in a little bit more with the exterior here. This is very cold, and then the yellow is quite striking. So if you want to see how that looks with birch, I feel like that could be a cool alternative color palette. But as you see here, oh wait, hang on. There's another side, and I like these kind of front parts too. This kind of pediment up here at the top is really nice. I really like this detail. And the kind of sequence of windows is really good, where they're different on each level. The bamboo works really well in the interior here. It's a lot more richer in color, and I think this is where you can bring a lot more of the saturation in. I really like the multicolored, monochrome, but the use of multiple different purple blocks to create the ceiling. This is really nice. And the chandeliers are cool too. They're a little opaque. I'm not sure if you want to toy with having blocks of white stained glass instead of these walls to give it more of like a crystal look. I really like the banners as these kind of like this kind of ornamentation on the columns, and I think the capitals of the columns are really good with the shelf. And it looks like you've got a slab within the shelf, which is another nice detail. Here are those images up top, and looks like you've just gone with like a picture of the sky. Over here we've got like another painting of the sky, which I really like. With all of these, they are very bright, and so I'm not exactly sure how this mod works, but if you could tone down the color a little bit or place some kind of lighting here, I think it would help read a little bit more natural, because these feel like an unnatural skylight. And I'm always one for also like trying to recreate it with some pixel art if you use the blocks in game. I think this works really well, but it is kind of like immersion breaking at some points. I don't know. I really appreciate it. I think it works. And just looking at the roof ornamentation here, these are really nice. If these can go outside, that'd be a cool opportunity for a clerestory window. Otherwise, you could just bring the barrel vault down all the way. This big interior space is really nice. And I know these are kind of hard to decorate. So normally what I like to do is like imagine there's a kind of event or some kind of reason for, just having some kind of thing that's happening helps you like come up with like ways to decorate. Like if there's a ball or something, then like you're going to need a lot of little tables, maybe a big open space in the middle, and then you can place, you don't have to, you could place villagers, you could place armor stands to be like people if you're into that. Otherwise, if this is like a survival base, it might be nice to leave it open. This throne is pretty cool. Maybe use some like trapdoors over here, but I really like the shaping. This kind of space is really nice with open windows, and the chandelier is really nice. It's coming down a little low, but I think it works. Oh, and I like this trapdoor ring around the ceiling. That's a really cool detail. So one other thing for your exteriors, especially when you're taking screenshots, we look like the FOV is really big. I mean, it's kind of like a fisheye effect. If you get further away and if you can render this far on your computer, which I know a lot of people can't, you stand as far back as you can with a super big render distance and you shrink your FOV as small as possible. It'll help you create screenshots that are kind of more flat instead of like this fisheye thing where it's spreading it out. It'll help you kind of condense it a little bit more. You can see it over here. Like this foreground is nice and big, and then by the time we get to the background, it's gotten really small, and we've got a lot of sky above here. So just shrinking that FOV will help you kind of compose these screenshots a little bit better. But all in all, this looks incredible. I can't wait to see where this goes. So our next submission is from ItsBJ, and they've said, let me get this guy out, that their submissions are based off of Lego sets, including this one here, which I'm a huge fan of. That's really... Ooh. That's really one way I got started with architecture ever since I was little. Loved Lego. And then it kind of transitioned into Minecraft and then into my, eventual field of study, which is super cool. And so, I always love to see someone with a passion for that. These three builds are based off of the Assembly Square modular building here. So just taking a look at them, I think you've done a pretty good job at capturing the general kind of vibe of all of these. See, yeah. I mean, they're proportioned pretty well within their own kind of scale here. And one thing I am really seeing is that, I guess, some of these feel like a little bit bigger than what the Lego scale is. So you can see here like about half and half like window to the structure, and here we've got like very thick columns, very thick horizontal elements, and then the windows are kind of punched in. And I feel like first off, I feel like there's kind of a greater emphasis on the vertical elements than the horizontal ones. Those are just kind of like an additional element that's mostly like a necessity of having the Lego part where the floors come off. And I feel like with these recreations, this one's pretty good. With these, like the horizontal elements are really thick. And so changing the focus so that the vertical elements are the more dominant ones and they kind of highlight the height of the structure could be helpful. And I think your block choice isn't terrible, but I feel like they're pretty saturated. And then the depth here, I don't know. It's kind of like, I feel like if you had like less saturated blocks and you could kind of condense this depth from like 3 blocks to 2, would help it read a little bit more. Because right now they're reading very like fortress-like. And I think these buildings aren't quite as like stereotomic, where it's a lot of like weight. I think you could shrink it down a little bit. But these look really good. Right here, this one is based on the pet shop. Again, I think you could do a little bit more work with texture here. Because obviously the advantage Lego has over Minecraft is that it's got much smaller pieces, and so you have a finer control over like intricate shapes. What Minecraft has is a much better kind of control over texture, since all of these just have to be, a single color like 3D mold plastic piece. These can Minecraft blocks are much thicker, but they can have more intricate textures. And so I think playing with texture and the combination of textures will help you emulate some of that detail that Lego can't afford, because you can't always afford like the smaller details here that the Lego builds have. And so it's kind of a trade-off. And again, with this one, this is probably a Lego creator house. I think what you've done here to mimic the shape is really nice. And so I think kind of a further adaptation of texture, of lighting, and kind of bringing it into the world a little bit more really help. Again, with this, another house appears, like working with, looks like red nether brick up on the roof here, and then the smooth quartz. I think you could like take this in multiple ways. You can make it look a little bit more like brick or like siding, but playing with textures and the different, especially on the roof here, like maybe instead of red nether brick, mangrove or acacia or something a little bit less jarring could help tie it in together. But I think as far as recreations go, most of these are pretty faithful adaptations, and I really like what you've done with them. You said a lot of these are kind of an exterior shell for a farm, which I always find, that's in my survival worlds, that's normally how I make most of my buildings. They're usually kind of just a shell that houses something else. And so I think these are a pretty good adaptation. Really like that. Okay, our next build is from David the Builder, and they've created the Holy Trinity Cathedral, heavily inspired by the Florence Cathedral, using Italian Gothic and Renaissance architecture, and that this is still a work in progress. So, just right off the bat, this central dome is incredible. I'm not sure how exactly you've made these shapes, but like the control you have over this is really phenomenal. I would love to see a little bit more of either the tools you used or how you exactly shaped that, but that's phenomenal. Let me scroll through the rest here. So we've got our front facade here. Looks like you got clocks outside. That's cool. The interior here, this looks like a pipe organ of some sort inside of this grand open space. And then these are our main aisles here. So we've got 3 aisles, and then like the rib vaulting you've got going, that's really nice. And then this central one is much more open with the clerestory windows up top. And this looks like some kind of second level in the main center. Then some ceiling details. These are really nice. I really appreciate these. And then this is a kind of mausoleum piece, which is really nice. I mean, a lot of churches do have like reliquaries where they store either the body parts of like saints or other holy people. And so that's a really nice detail. A little morbid, but it is like a nice piece of world building here. And this floor, I really like what you've done with the floor. Like, I would have never thought to use this combination of blocks. I'm not exactly sure. This is probably a texture pack, what this guy is. But we've got logs, stone bricks of some sort, these resin bricks. Like, the color work is really nice. I really appreciate this floor. Go back to the start here. I feel like your proportions are a little bit off here. This main aisle is much squatter than this main kind of dome here. And I think it's kind of, throwing things out of proportion a bit. Either you could shrink this in a little bit, or you could make it taller. Either way, just kind of like this height is probably a good height for the rest of this to kind of keep the two feeling balanced, because this feels it feels like it's at a smaller scale than this grand sort of portion, and the two feel a little bit disconnected, which, in some cases, like, this part could have been the original church and then this addition was built. It does happen in real life. But just kind of keeping the proportions a little bit closer would help these two feel a little bit more connected. And then with the kind of base system you've got going here, I would love to see a little bit more structure on the outside, because it just appears like a flat facade with windows punched in. I feel like you would need a little bit more support on the exterior to match the kind of vaulting you have in the interior. This feels properly weighty, but on the outside, it feels a little bit just kind of like, these feel pretty good. This feels a little weightless. Up front, like what you got going with the front window. I feel like you could tone it down just a skosh, but I like the sort of tracery you've got going here. I think the angle of the roof could also be steeper to help with that proportioning. This is a pretty shallow roof, but compared to the vaulting you have going inside, I think having a steeper roof pitch would also help. I love the stained glass. That's a really nice touch. Over here, this pipe organ, again with the weightlessness, this feels like a very heavy element, and then you've got this dainty little staircase going up where it plays. I would either love to see some kind of more of a support system for this, or where is it? This would actually be just a really good spot for it. This might be a spot for the choir, actually, but this wouldn't be a terrible place for the pipe organ if you want to move it over, because I feel like this is the appropriate amount of weight to carry that pipe organ. It feels monumental, and so putting that here would help it feel more like a central element. But again, look at that floor. That is really nice. All in all, this is a great build. I can't wait to see where this goes. Our next submission is from IncaRaids, and they said they've been using real-world location and photos of existing buildings to inspire the base they are building for this season of their SMP. So, right off the bat, I really like how grounded this feels. I think you've done a pretty good job at creating mostly down-to-earth, kind of squat feeling buildings. This is a really nice one. Clock tower here. I like this overhang. That's actually a really nice detail. And then I think your kind of proportions here with the taller clock tower and then this squatter kind of tower that's still brought out is really nice. The shaping is really good on that. This bridge is nice with the repeating modules. That's always good. Looks like this is going into your shopping district of some sort. Not sure if you made this sign, but that's really cool. And here we've got some kind of warehouse. Appears to be on the other end of that bridge. So again, you've got kind of the repeating modules. So just a few things here. One, the transition between these colors. Like, I like the color choice. I think this is a palette that works well together. But here, when you've got the transition, like, we go from white to this reddish brown and then into the mangrove here. And instead of being like a flat transition, it kind of eases in. And so I'm not really sure what it's trying to accomplish here. Because if you're articulating that this is like a change in materials, like normally that would be a very defined line going across. Whereas if it was a kind of weathering, then it would be peppered in throughout. If there was like, this was like a white cladding over top of a brick thing and it was like slowly chipping away, then there would be like spots where it would be chipped away more and other spots where it would be mostly pristine. But this here reads like all of the white paint got stripped off in this middle layer, and then we've got this kind of red. This reads like a wooden kind of portico built on top, and I really love this detail up here. I think just being more intentional with the lines going across here, making them more defined, but having like the kind of mixing of the texture in between the layers would work really nicely. I think this just kind of reads like it was painted kind of sloppily and the paint is just kind of dripping down. And then this middle part, like the paint is also creeping up. I'm not exactly sure. This part here, these two kind of facade elements over top read like they're just kind of placed on this part here. I think it's these parts that kind of jut out here. Either you could carry it all across so it's like a framework that the facade is placed in, or you just bring back the vertical elements and maybe make them thicker, and then they will read more as like a heavy structural element in this building. Same goes here. Your main like structural elements read as like these thin columns here, and so this reads as like a really like thin stick frame building that these windows are then placed in. I think you're doing a good job right here where you've got the hierarchy where these are all the same and then we've got one that's different. I think you could push this one out or pull it in a little bit to draw like more attention to that fact besides just the different color. But I like where you're going with this one. This one here I think does a great job, but again with the color transition, if it's like getting a little bit mossy up here, I'm not sure why it goes to gray and then down to brick, unless this entire top part should be gray. But I think just keeping like your color palette a little bit more intentional and trying to evoke like certain materials will really help the builds feel more realistic. This one's nice. I think you could do away, it might be a lighting concern actually, if this is survival, for these lights to kind of be so like placed so often. I think it would read better if it was just a single light up top, but I also think you would probably lose out on the exact amount of light that you want, so that's a trade-off you have to make. But this bridge looks really nice, and I like these details coming up from the columns here. That's a really nice kind of continuation of this form. Again here, I would like to see like, again, a little bit of hierarchy here, since it's just the same over and over and over again. There's really no like payoff to all of this, and so having some kind of like key central element here to kind of draw in attention would help make this read like even better. But I really like what you've done here, and I think you're doing a great job. And then last but certainly not least, we have Val, and they've said these are some sample builds they made in their creative world, heavily inspired from gothic architecture with some dark fantasy elements. They use cool tone palettes for the build to sell the unforgiving, empty, and dark vibes for the place. And the mod they used was Conquest Reforge for the block selections and resource pack. So right off the bat, this is a really dominant composition here. Just looking at the player scale, like if you're standing down here, like these look pretty monumental above you. It's probably 20 to 30 blocks. I like the use of the repeating modules here. Really nice. Inside, some kind of hallway. These chandelier pieces are really cool. never really used this mod, so I'm pretty unfamiliar with the kind of elements here. Like the vaulting going up doesn't look like it reaches the roof, so I'm not entirely sure what that's doing, unless it's what the chandeliers are hanging from. Which, in that case, I feel like you might be able to just hang them all the way from the ceiling, really add to that verticality. Coming here, appears to be an aisle within like a cathedral of some sort. Looks like we got seating on either end. This kind of roof thing, I'm not sure if this would really work. This is typically, the roof will come down and then it's resting upon a support here. And so this is sitting unsupported. You would kind of want one continuous roof line or roof kind of arc that would support all of this. Because if we're looking at this here, this would probably collapse along this middle part. So either like a line of columns here or creating one continuous arc would help sell this a little bit more. This here is a close-up of the kind of base system you've got going. And so first, I think the tracery you have is really nice. The mix of walls, looks like some kind of fence block. And then this circle at the top I really like. And then you've got that inset within a column, always great. And then we've got these kind of spires to cap it off. And then these are the same kind of spires up at the top here. And it looks like fence gates in between. And what I think you could do, I really like how you've kind of compartmentalized this so you can like repeat it pretty easily. I think with these spires, you want to kind of carry this hierarchy up. So it's not every other block that there's this huge spire. You have like a huge spire and like maybe 3 little ones and then another big one to kind of align with these. And so it helps kind of sell that hierarchy a little bit more. This kind of, I forgot what you titled this kind of structure here. Is that round in this game? Looks like a mod element here, but I like this kind of 3-part arch. That's really cool. Yeah, the block selection in this mod is really nice. And I like the kind of round ambulatory space you've got going here. This looks like some kind of mosaic piece, which is really nice. Then over here, another kind of round element that's sticking out. Looks like we've got kind of a mismatch here between the angles of the arches, then this central piece. I think one, carrying this down all the way to the ground and then building this exterior structure off of it will help it read a little bit more cohesively. So right now this looks like it's just kind of placed upon this kind of structure, but realistically if this is pulled off the ground, this should go all the way back down to the ground and these walls would continue underneath. I like the kind of staircase you've got going up. This looks like the start of like a really impressive like cathedral build. So all in all, this looks great. The only other thing I would touch on is just with the higher res texture packs, you also run into like things looking a little bit fuzzy. And also like when things are higher resolution, you do notice them, like the transitions between things a little bit more. Like down here, like when the textures are high res and they like butt up against each other, they don't transition as well. I think Minecraft does natively with the 16 by 16 kind of textures is that like they're just low definition enough where you don't really like notice when 2 or 3 of them kind of intermingle. When things are like very defined, like in these kind of faithful like texture packs, it's really jarring when you have like a lot of one texture and then it switches to another texture. I think you've handled it pretty well here, and I think the increased block selection really makes that nice, but the mix in textures is much more noticeable. But all in all, this is great, and I really appreciate you submitting this. So that'll do it today. Again, huge thank you to everyone that submitted. This couldn't have been possible without my lovely, wonderful audience. I'll leave the forum open again. I'll post it in the comment down below. So that way you missed out on this first time. Or if you want to post an update, if you're featured, then that'll be open for you. Hopefully if this does well, we can do more of these. If this does really well, what I'd love to do is to create a kind of like architectural contract competition where I build out like a plot, the surrounding, and then give you guys some kind of like guidelines for like the client and the type of building and everything. And then we can have like a competition of like different solutions to the same problem. I feel like that would be a really interesting idea, but I'd obviously need a little bit more traction for that. But hopefully if this does well, we can see that in the future. If you enjoyed this, be sure to like. If you want to see more of these videos in the future, be sure to subscribe. And thank you all for watching.